The Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hey everyone, welcome back to Speaking of Cults. I'm Chris Shelton, your host. Thank you for joining me. I'm really excited about today's episode because I'm introducing a new model I've developed that helps explain human behavior, not just in cults, but in everyday life, politics, family dynamics, and even our own personal decisions. I spent a lot of years after getting out of Scientology working on recovering from that experience, and as you know, it takes a lot to get over something like Scientology. Cults are a kind of masterclass in emotional and psychological manipulation, and we've spent years diving down various rabbit holes on this channel and listening to other victims and survivors tell their stories so we could get a deep look into how cults do what they do. But for me, understanding what a cult did to me was just the beginning. After I deconstructed enough of Scientology to see how hypnosis and influence and thought reform techniques are riddled throughout all of its activities, I wanted to understand more. As you know, especially if you are a cult survivor, there's a lot of judgment waiting for you in the world from people who really have no idea what they're talking about. I've pushed back on that for years, like when people say that you deserved to be in a cult or to be abused because you were too stupid to see what they were doing to you. Or how people believe that mind control is some kind of government operation to make us all into robots and slaves and everything is brainwashing us all the time. These just aren't true things. But even then, I wanted to understand why people would jump to such conclusions and would be so sure they're right. In short, I wanted to know why people act the way they do. And today, I'm going to share with you the model I've put together that I think answers that question. It's called the REM Model, and it stands for reason, emotion, and morality. These are the three layers of human behavior that interact in ways most of us don't realize. But once you understand them, you'll start to see people differently. You'll understand why someone joins a cult, why your cousin believes in wild conspiracy theories, or why two people with good intentions can end up in total conflict. Let's dig in. So, what is the REM model? Well, I want you to imagine there are three layers to what is driving or motivating us. The top level is what is closest to the outside world and to our own conscious awareness. The deeper we go down these layers, the closer we get to our own identity and what really makes us who we are as an individual. Here's the basic idea. At the surface, we have R, reason or rationalization. This is the layer of thinking, planning, and decision-making. It's what people say they believe, what they think they're doing logically. But often, it's really just rationalizing, explaining behavior after the fact. This ties directly into Daniel Kahneman's concept of System 2 thinking. Slow, deliberate, effortful reasoning. The kind we like to think we use all the time. But in reality, we mostly use this to justify decisions we've already made based on faster emotional or moral responses. Underneath that is E, emotion. This includes two things, our immediate emotional reactions and our long-term emotional needs. Needs like safety, connection, identity, control, and meaning. These needs are often invisible but powerful. They shape what we feel, what we fear, and what we seek. This is more aligned with System 1 thinking, fast, intuitive, emotional responses, the kind of thinking that happens automatically without effort. When someone says something that feels offensive or comforting, when we get defensive or joyful in a split second, that's System 1 firing. In the REM model, we give this emotional system more credit. It's not just a shortcut, it's a driver. Emotional needs act like internal GPS signals, even if we don't know they're active. And underneath that is M, morality. Our moral foundations are the deepest part of who we think we are. They're the rules we believe shouldn't be broken. What we see as good, evil, right, or wrong. These might be religious, cultural, political, or just personal, but they shape our entire worldview. This layer aligns with concepts from Jonathan Haidt's moral foundations theory, which says people have basic moral intuitions, like care versus harm, loyalty versus betrayal, authority versus subversion, that influence behavior long before reasoning kicks in. These are usually emotionally anchored, meaning they feel true at a gut level, and we build arguments afterward to support them. Each of these layers influences the others, and when something shifts in the deeper layers of emotion or morality, it changes how we think and behave on the surface. This is why someone can defend a harmful belief for years, then one day have an emotional or moral breakthrough, and suddenly their logic changes too, like when people wake up from a cult. That's the heart of the REM model. This didn't come out of some ivory tower, but from years of working with cult victims and survivors, interviewing experts and specialists, and studying the literature and the social sciences. It reflects what's already been shown in behavioral science, moral psychology, and even basic neuroscience. I've just packaged it in a way that's easy to remember and easy to apply to real life. So let's look at how this works in cultic environments. Say someone joins a high-control religious group. On the surface, they might say, "This group teaches the truth. We're the chosen people." That's how they think about it and what the members tell themselves about the group, meaning this is happening at the reason level. But emotionally, they might be fulfilling deep needs. A sense of belonging, clarity in a chaotic world, relief from grief or trauma, or validation they never got elsewhere. That's the emotional layer. At the base, their moral system has often been rewritten. They now believe that obedience is good, that outsiders are evil, and that questioning the leader is wrong. That's the moral foundation the group has reshaped. So even if you show them facts or logical arguments, it won't change their mind because the real engine isn't the reason layer. It's the emotional and moral structure underneath. Let's consider a specific example. The group known as the Children of God and later rebranded as the Family International. Members truly believed they were spreading divine love and truth. But many were also trying to satisfy deep emotional needs for safety, identity, and purpose, especially those who joined during times of social upheaval in the 60s and 70s. Their moral code was flipped. Obedience to the leader was godly, outsiders were satanic. So even when horrific abuses were exposed, many rationalized them in service of their ultimate mission. Or take Scientology. A Sea Org member might believe they're saving the planet. I sure did, and that was how I thought about what I was doing. But underneath, they may crave certainty, purpose, or even redemption from past trauma. And morally, they've been taught that the ends justify the means, that suppressive persons deserve to be cut off, and that disobedience is treason. This model also explains why people leave. When a moral break happens, like they see a leader contradict their teachings or abuse others without consequence, it hits the core. If that moral foundation cracks, the emotional need for belonging may now conflict with a new emotional reaction of anger or grief or betrayal. That emotional upheaval pushes the person to reassess, and their reasoning starts to change. Maybe we weren't the good guys after all. Cults are extreme, but they're not alien. They simply push the same buttons, REM buttons, harder and more often than everyday environments do. That's why this model is so useful. It doesn't just explain cult members, it explains us all. A person who aggressively defends capitalism might not just be thinking economically. Emotionally, they may need to believe that success is earned because it protects them from feeling powerless. Morally, they may see personal responsibility as sacred. Someone who insists on rigid gender roles may emotionally need to feel safe and in control, and morally believe tradition is inherently good. So even when presented with data showing that flexibility helps families thrive, their reasoning doesn't shift because the foundation hasn't. A teenager who lashes out at authority might be trying to meet emotional needs for autonomy and respect. If their moral foundation includes the belief that control is bad or abusive, they will rationalize their rebellion as justified. This is typical behavior from almost any teen because it's also part of our stages of development as human beings when we transition from the secure but constricting environment of the family to the more independent thinking of young adults getting ready to make their own way in the world. The REM model helps us see these patterns. It applies to everyone, not just people in cults. Let's take a few everyday examples where the REM layers interact, like at work. Imagine a colleague who constantly challenges every decision. I'm sure none of you know who this person is. On the surface, at the reason level, they say they're just asking for clarity or protecting standards. But underneath, in the emotional layer, they may feel a deep fear of being overlooked or dismissed. At the moral level, they may believe that speaking up is a sign of integrity, even if it frustrates others. If you only respond to the logic, you miss what's really driving the behavior. Or in families, a parent may insist their child go into a specific profession. Their reason might be it's a stable career, but emotionally, they could be driven by fear that their child will struggle as they once did. Morally, they might believe that a good parent ensures their child's security, even at the cost of autonomy. The child, however, may value freedom and expression more highly. Both are operating from different REM stacks, leading to conflict. Or we can look at online arguments. Someone posts a strong opinion online and gets dragged into a heated argument. The content of the post is reason, but their emotional need for validation or control might be what's really fueling the defensiveness. And morally, they may feel they're standing up for something righteous, which is why no amount of counter logic will change their mind. In activism, people who protest or take a public stance often do so from a deep emotional place. They may have experienced or witnessed injustice, which created strong emotional needs around fairness or safety. Their moral foundation may include principles like, if you don't stand up, you're complicit. That shapes what seems like reasonable action to them, which may not seem logical to others who lack those emotional and moral drivers. Let me share a couple of short stories. I once knew a guy who spent years working in a corporate job that looked perfect on paper. He was a Scientologist, but that's not the important part of the story. He had all the right reasons for staying: good pay, benefits, job security. But under the surface, they were feeling trapped and unfulfilled. Their emotional needs for creativity and meaning were going unmet. Eventually, they reached a moral turning point. They began to feel that staying in the job was a form of self-betrayal. Once that moral break occurred, the logic flipped. What once seemed irrational, quitting a stable job, now felt like the only ethical choice. This kind of struggle is very common and may have even happened to you in some way. How we resolve these conflicts is a personal thing that we have to decide based on our own situation, yet we're always quick to judge others based on our own REM stack. This is how so many conflicts happen between people. Or consider the story of a woman who kept defending her partner's toxic behavior. We've never seen anybody do that, right? Reason told her that he was just under stress, that things would improve. Emotionally, she needed to feel secure and not alone. Morally, she believed in loyalty and not giving up on people. It was only after witnessing him harm someone else that her moral foundation shifted. The emotional bond cracked, and suddenly all the rationalizations fell away. She left him, even though she had insisted for years she never would. The REM model gives us a way to move beyond surface-level disagreement. We stop asking, why are they so irrational, and start asking, what emotional needs or moral beliefs are shaping this person's logic? Even in minor personal disagreements, this shift in thinking can improve relationships. You might realize that your partner isn't arguing about dishes, they're reacting to a deeper emotional need, like being appreciated or respected. And if their sense of fairness or loyalty feels violated, their moral layer is involved too. That's why it feels bigger than it looks on the surface. Understanding the REM layers allows us to listen better, connect more deeply, and even help others grow. Not by attacking their reasoning, but by empathizing with the structure beneath it. Here's where things get even more interesting and maybe personally useful. A huge reason we misunderstand each other is because we project. That means we take our emotions and morals and assume other people share them. As I like to say, denial isn't just a river in Egypt, and projection isn't something that just happens in movie theaters. So if you value honesty and feel safest when people are direct, you might assume someone else is lying when they're just being cautious. If you need harmony, you might think someone who's blunt is being cruel. You're not seeing their REM stack, you're seeing your own reflected back. This projection leads to false explanations, which we see on social media all the time. People jump to conclusions about other people's motivations, and they are sure they are right because that's how they think or feel they would do if they were in the same situation, so they lay that on others. Then they just make up answers for why this other person is acting that way, such as saying, they must be doing this for attention, or they're just lazy, or they hate freedom. Those are all guesses based on our emotional needs and morals, not theirs. Understanding this makes room for empathy and also more effective communication. Instead of arguing about the surface logic, we can ask, what do they really need? What values are they protecting? One of the most powerful features of the REM model is its ability to explain not just behavior, but change. People don't stay fixed in one REM pattern forever. Life events, new relationships, traumas, or revelations can shift the layers, especially the emotional and moral foundations. And this creates visible changes in behavior and thinking. Most lasting behavior change happens when the deeper layers shift first. This is actually one of the superpowers that human beings have if we allow ourselves the freedom to change. Neuroscience has shown that our brains are built for this change. It's called neuroplasticity, which is how we learn or adapt by reorganizing neural connections. Let's say someone grows up believing that authority is always right. That's their moral layer. They feel emotionally safe when obeying. So they rationalize even harmful systems as necessary. But then, maybe they see a trusted authority abuse someone. That creates emotional discomfort or cognitive dissonance. They feel betrayed or angry or ashamed because their moral foundations have been disrupted. That emotional rupture makes them reevaluate what's moral and whether this trusted authority is actually acting morally or being a hypocrite. And if there is one thing that almost all human beings universally despise, it's hypocrisy. So now their reasoning starts to shift and they begin to question. This happens in reverse too. If you help someone feel safe, validated, and heard, you might reduce the emotional defenses that protect a harmful belief. And over time, their moral lens might shift too. This is why just debating rarely changes minds, but connection, storytelling, and shared values often do. Let's talk about emotion. When someone experiences a major life change, such as losing a job, becoming a parent, or surviving an illness, their emotional needs shift. What mattered before may no longer fulfill them. For example, someone who used to chase status might realize they need security or meaning more than recognition. That emotional shift then causes them to reevaluate their moral values and what they consider good or worthwhile in life. Here's Joe Snarkton, a man in his early 30s who loves to spend hours getting involved in online debates and owning people with sharp logic. He prides himself on being smarter than others, and he sees kindness as weakness. His favorite motto is, "Facts don't care about your feelings," and he loves to remind people of that. Then one day, he meets the right person who somehow sees past this ego, and Joe falls in love. Before too long, he becomes a father. Suddenly, his emotional needs are now centered around safety, love, and protection because his wife and child are far more important to him than debating and trolling on the internet. He finds himself caring more about emotional impact than being right. That shift in emotional needs leads to a shift in morality. He begins to believe that compassion and humility are higher values than being clever. His behavior and reasoning transform. He stops arguing to win and starts listening to understand. That's the REM model in motion. Or think about moral shifts. People raised in rigid environments may absorb very strong black and white ideas about right and wrong. We've seen hundreds of examples of that in the interviews I've done on this channel with people raised in tough religious homes. But what happens when they encounter hypocrisy within that system? They might feel emotionally betrayed. That emotional conflict triggers a reevaluation of their moral foundations, and that reordering changes how they reason. Here's a story. A woman grew up believing it was morally wrong to question her religious leaders. But after witnessing abuse being covered up, she felt disgusted and heartbroken. Her emotional need for safety and truth clashed with her moral loyalty. Eventually, she redefined her morality, deciding that protecting the vulnerable mattered more than protecting the hierarchy. Once that shift happened, her entire way of thinking changed. She began to question everything she'd previously accepted. You've seen me interview a few such women. These shifts don't happen all at once. They happen over time, often with a lot of internal struggle. That's why people sometimes seem stuck or resistant, because their deeper emotional or moral layers haven't caught up with what they're starting to suspect at the cognitive level. And here's something critical. If you want to help someone change, arguing with their reason rarely works. Instead, listen for what emotional needs they're protecting. Pay attention to the moral values they're trying to live up to. That's where real transformation happens. So, how can you use the REM model in your own life? When in conflict, ask, what layer am I reacting from? Am I stuck in reason while the real issue is emotional or moral? Or when judging others, ask yourself, what needs or values might be underneath their behavior? When trying to help someone change, remember, people don't change because of logic alone. They change when they feel safe and their values shift. When reflecting on yourself, think about how your own reasoning has changed over time. What emotional needs or moral revelations drove that shift? This is just the beginning of what the REM model can explain. In past podcasts, we've explored different parts of these 3 layers. We've talked in detail about critical thinking and how emotions work and how religious or cult beliefs or ideologies can define our morality. We've described how cults target emotional needs, how morality is shaped and reshaped, and how cognitive dissonance keeps people stuck until something deeper cracks. It was all leading to this REM model and figuring out why people act the way they do. I've been working on this question for years, and I think this model can help any of us navigate our lives and relationships better, in the same way the BITE model can help us understand cults better. I'm not pretending that the REM model explains everything about everyone everywhere. Human beings are complex. There's a lot going on under the hood. Models aren't about explaining every single thing. They're for giving some structure and understanding to an otherwise chaotic and confusing situation. And to be honest, I can't think of too many things more chaotic and confusing than human behavior. But I hope that what I've put together can help you. Perhaps in future shows, we can look even more deeply at how cults manipulate each layer of the REM model, or how personality disorders such as narcissism are reflected in this model. Or maybe there are other aspects of this that you'd like me to see, which right now I don't. You tell me. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with someone. Leave a comment, let me know what you think of all of this, and send me your stories. Have you ever had a moment where your morals shifted or your emotional needs changed everything you thought was true? I'd be curious to hear about that. All right, so this was short and sweet this week, but I wanted to share it with you, and I hope it helps. Thank you for listening and for your support of my work and my channel. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep speaking of cults. Bye-bye.